We are called to live good lives, certainly in response to what Christ has done for us, but also because we live in a crooked, a twisted, a distorted generation. It's messed up. I don't need to tell you that the world has all sorts of things all twisted up and wrong, right? Especially when it comes to God's plan for us. But I've noticed that there's a tendency in our grumbling culture to say that it's worse than it's ever been. It's terrible and everything is falling apart and we just live in the worst time ever. But you know what? It's always been a struggle for God's people to live out their faith in a sinful world. It's always been this way. You can say, well, the good old days or whenever back when, but you know what? If you pick a time period, I guarantee you that in that time period there were people who were grumbling and who were arguing and fighting and not happy. Take a look at these verses. I won't read them to you, but in Isaiah, I just ran across this section, and boy, it seemed to me like they were struggling with the exact same stuff that we struggle with today in our culture. It's always been a struggle because there's always been dark forces at work seeking to twist us, twist even God's people, mold us into the way of the world. And having a faith that works means that we look instead to God's power to mold us and shape us. We look to God's guidance and direction so that we don't walk crooked paths, but we walk straight paths. The word there that's translated as innocent, it's interesting, the initial Greek word actually means unmixed or pure, you might say. And he's saying we need to take care that we don't let the world's way of thinking and living creep in and mix into our lives. We don't compromise. We don't compromise in the way we treat others. Just because others treat us poorly, we don't say, well, then I can treat them poorly back. We don't dehumanize people who disagree with us, who we think are on a false path. Even as we fight against evil, we maintain our integrity and live honorable lives, trusting in God, not in what we might do. We don't seek change using the world's tactics, using manipulation and lies and fear and force to get things changed. Paul tells us that it's likely that we will be called names, we will be labeled, and people will judge us simply when we stand firm on the truth of God's word. We will. But he also says, but don't give non-believers legitimate reasons to talk about how you're a bad person. Don't give them legitimate reasons to say, look, they're not what they say they are. Peter writes about that as well. And he says that our goodness is the kind of influence that God calls us to bring to bear on the world. That's how we influence the world, through our goodness, through our honorable lives. And he says people are going to notice. Even people caught up in a dark and twisted world will notice when we live the way God has called us to. And then finally he says that the way we can do that is by holding firm to the word of life. We hold firmly to Jesus, the living word of life, who has given us his salvation, and we recognize this is the greatest thing we could possibly have in this world, is Jesus Christ and what he's given us. But we also hold firm to his word, his teaching. And that means when we're thinking about what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad, we don't make our judgments based on the way I think or the way I feel. We don't make our judgments based on what the majority around us believe. We make our judgment based on God's word, on what he tells us. We hold firmly to the word of life, and as we hold firmly to the word of life, you know what we end up doing? We end up holding that word of life out to others so they might actually see through us God's wisdom and God's goodness.